Hey everyone, so a few weeks ago I was fortunate enough to sit down with Jeff Lemire at New York Comic Con to chat about Absolute Flash, JSA, and his new creator-owned series Minor Arcana. I thought this was a really fun and insightful conversation, and I wanted to share it with you all today. I'm aware this is a little different to my usual style of videos, so consider this a bonus one while I continue working on this month's main video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you'd like to see more of these types of videos, I'd be happy to do them, and I hope you enjoy it. Before we continue though, just a quick reminder to leave a like on this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe to Owen Likes Comics so you don't miss out on any future videos. Hello everyone, welcome to New York Comic Con. I'm here with the wonderful Jeff Lemire. Jeff, thank you for taking the time to speak with me. How are you finding the convention so far?
Busy. It's good.
It's very busy. This is a lot louder than Harrogate.
Yes,
I can't lie.
very much so.
But it's good. A little bit sweaty, a little bit loud, but I'm making the most of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, you've got a lot going on this weekend.
Yeah.
We're at your table here. You've got the Absolute DC panel tomorrow. I suppose a good way to kind of segue would be to start by talking about Absolute Flash. I imagine we're going to be getting some info on that tomorrow, perhaps.
Maybe a little. It's
maybe
not
a little
till March, so that we're kind of teasing it up. But we'll maybe talk about it.
But obviously, it's you and Nick Robles.
Yes.
It looks like a really interesting series.
Yeah.
The Absolute era is kind of getting underway now.
Yeah,
Absolute Batman just came out.
Yeah.
Got Absolute Superman, Absolute Wonder Woman. With the kind of premise of this idea that it's the DC characters we know, but with elements taken away. Obviously, I think the information that's out publicly about Flash is it's going to center around Wally. Is that correct? And it's going to take out some of the legacy aspects of the Flash mantle.
Yeah.
Obviously, we probably can't go into too much spoilers about the book.
Yeah.
But in regards to what drew you to the Flash, to Wally, and to this kind of story, can you talk a little bit about what kind of drew you to the Flash?
Yeah, I mean, I started talking to Scott Snyder maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I can't remember now. It's been a while about the potential of this Absolute universe, and you know, when I originally spoke to him, we didn't have a particular character in mind yet. It was just being part of it, and so I started thinking about potential characters, and the idea of Wally West struck me for a couple of reasons. First of all, it seemed like the universe it was starting to build with Scott's Batman, Jason on Superman, Kelly on Wonder Woman. I felt like it would be interesting to have a teenage superhero because that was something the universe didn't have yet. So Wally seemed like a natural choice for that. And just to get, the Batman book and some of the other books have a bit of a dark, heavy feel to them. And I wanted something that could counter that a little bit, have some energy, some lightness too, a sense of fun as well in this universe was important. So all those things drew me to the Flash.
Obviously, Absolute Batman will be out by the time you're reading, because that is a very dark book. It takes the Batman iconography in some pretty deep places. It looks the same things like Absolute Superman, Absolute Wonder Woman. So I think it is a refreshing twist to have a kind of more youthful hope and optimism, which is something that Wally's always represented in.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that that idea is in the Absolute universe is more needed than ever.
You definitely need different flavors in this universe. They can't all be one mood or one tone. So it was fun to kind of be an anecdote to the other books a little bit, and to I mean, Wally was kind of the Flash I grew up with from the Teen Titans as Kid Flash, and then when he became the Flash after Crisis. So he's always sort of been your my favorite of the various Flashes, except for Jay Garrick, of course.
We'll talk about Jay in a second. And that's really fascinating to me, and I think that with the Absolute books, from everyone I've spoke to and from everything I've read, it seems like there's going to be a lot of freedom and autonomy with these books.
Yeah.
Obviously, there is kind of the overarching editorial idea of what the Absolute universe is. But in terms of letting the creative team tell their stories, it seems like there's a lot of freedom and flexibility.
Total freedom. Yeah, it's been great. It really is almost like doing a creator-owned book or something where you're just building this character from the ground. I mean, you're pulling in really familiar elements of the Flash mythology, obviously, but you have a lot of freedom in what you can do with them. And as now we've all sort of gotten into our series a bit, and I've written 6 issues, I think, at this point, and so now we're starting to talk a little bit more about the universe building.
Yeah, how it
At
kind of
least
connects.
at the beginning, in the first 6 issues, the first sort of arc, we had total freedom to kind of build our own little pocket within the world and our own flavor, and that was cool. And I think it'll bring some diversity to the universe.
Definitely. I think it's a difficult balance to find with initiatives like this, but I think that like everything I've seen from the Absolute line, then like Marvel's Ultimate line as well, seems to be striking that balance quite well of like allowing creators to come in and like really reinvent these status quos in interesting ways while still funneling into these central ideas.
Yeah.
So with that, obviously, the pitch for Absolute Flash seems to be it's Wally without the legacy of Barry and everything that came before. It's really interesting to me that you'd take on a project like that at the same time as JSA.
Yeah, it's like...
which is a series all about
opposites.
legacy. I know just from kind of reading interviews with you that the JSA are a team that are fairly near and dear to your heart.
Oh, yeah, big time.
And it feels like now, obviously, like, it's been like the Jeff Johns era of JSA for quite a while.
Yeah,
He's had
for a
a
long
very
time.
accomplished run on that series, pretty much like the last 20 plus years. He's been
Basically, yeah.
writing great JSA comics. And we've had other bits, like there was the Tim Sheridan, Alan Scott series that came out a couple of years ago that's very good. And then obviously there's the new ongoing that you're starting. Is it next month that starts?
Yes, November, yeah.
So I'm really interested in hearing kind of switching from a book that's all about removing legacy to one that's all about celebrating and embracing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's good to have different projects that kind of stretch different parts of your brain, you know, and those books really are the opposite. You have, in Absolute Flash, we have, obviously, it's a solo character book with Wally West, and we have removed, for the most part, this element of the legacy of the Flashes. And then you have JSA, which is all about legacy, all about history, all about their connection to the rest of the universe. So yeah, they're complete, and it's like a massive cast of characters, like a huge cast. So complete opposite the two books, and it's kind of fun to
do both.
both because they don't use the same parts of my creative mind.
That makes total sense. Some of the artwork, some of the teasers that's come out for JSA looks absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to this series. Can you talk a little bit about how the book came to be? Was that something you pitched to DC? Was that something they came to you? Or what was the kind of the initial conversations about doing it?
Yeah, I mean, JSA's, I've kind of coveted that for a while. I love, I'm a huge fan. The first comic book I ever bought when I was like 6 years old was a JSA reprint from the 70s, right? So but I know Jeff's kind of had that forever, you know. There was one point somewhere, I don't know, probably like 2015, 2016, where they were thinking of bringing back the JSA, and I was approached about that, and I got very excited, but it didn't work out. So it's been this thing that I've kind of always wanted to do. And then when I started talking about Absolute Flash with DC, my editor, Andrew Marino, who also edits Flash, approached me about JSA, and it was just perfect timing in my schedule, and just kind of perfect timing. Jeff was coming off his 12 issues he just did, and this All-In initiative was coming, so it seemed like a great time for a new era for JSA. Yeah,
definitely. It seemed like everything was timed really perfectly with Jeff's run coming to an end, DC doing this kind of relaunch, and then this is a series you've always wanted to do. It's the kind of perfect opportunity.
Yeah, really.
So with that, I imagine you've got a lot of favorite characters from the JSA. Are there any that maybe you initially didn't think you were going to love that,
Totally.
Well, writing the series, you've really kind of gravitated towards?
Yeah, I've always loved Dr. Midnight, but it was always the original, like the Golden Age Dr. Midnight, for whatever reason. I love that character. And the Beth Chapel version of Dr. Midnight is our Dr. Midnight in the series. And I didn't know a lot about the character other than just remembering her from Infinity Inc. when I was a kid. So she always was going to be a part of the book, but as I started writing the character, I kind of fell in love with that character. And she started going in directions I didn't expect, and she really surprised me. She's become a favorite for sure. And then, of course, like Alice Scott, Jay Garrick, and Ted Grant. It's a real thrill to write those.
I bet. I'm almost jealous that you're getting to write these characters that have so much history and reverence towards them.
Yeah.
With that, so obviously, like, the JSA are a team that you're very fond of. Are there any particular runs that you're kind of like, not so much drawing inspiration from, but kind of carrying with you into this iteration of the team?
I'm trying to bring all of it, to be honest. Like, when I was a kid, All-Star Squadron and Infinity Inc. were the books in the 80s, and I loved them. So I'm bringing a lot of that into it for sure. I love Jeff's run, especially like maybe the first 80 or so issues he did in the 2000s. Like, that was iconic to me. So I'm trying to capture the flavor of some of that. And then, of course, the stuff in the 70s that Paul Levitz did was really cool. And James Robinson's Golden Age was a big touchstone to that, and I'm trying to bring it all in. And, you know, it's a big book, but that's the joy of it, is that it's so big, it can encompass so many different characters
Absolutely.
and so many different sort of touchstones from different runs.
Absolutely. So the final thing I want to ask you about, I won't take up too much of your time today. The final thing I want to talk to you about, I don't know if you can see on the table, is Minor Arcana, the new Create Your Own series you're doing. I've read both of the 2 issues that are out currently, and I want to say to your face, I think it's a brilliant series.
Oh, thank you.
It's funny because, like, obviously I've read a lot of your work, both the big 2 stuff and a lot of the independent work you've done. And it's like, I feel like I know what to expect from a Jeff Lemire Create Your Own work.
Sure.
So I'm reading the first issue and it's like, okay, small town, rural America, familial drama. So, okay, this feels comfortable. And then it gets very kind of psychedelic and trippy.
Yeah.
And then, like, especially going into the second issue and finding out about all of kind of the ideas of tarot behind it, it seems like such a fascinating concept to explore in a comic. Can you talk a little bit about the influence of tarot and mysticism and magic in Minor Arcana, where that came from and how you've approached telling the story using those ideas?
Yeah, it was a real evolution. I had a little spark of an idea for a character who was a small town psychic. I've always been kind of fascinated with those storefronts you see everywhere, right? Like, it seems like there's a story behind everyone, you know? So I had this idea of a small town psychic and then her daughter coming home and then her being the real psychic and the tension between the mother-daughter. So that was there. And as I kind of got into, like, researching mysticism and, you know, psychics and all this stuff, tarot instantly became sort of the Rosetta Stone of figuring out the series, because, I mean, the tarot is so unbelievably rich with iconography, symbolism, story. And once I started researching more and more about tarot, it just this idea that every person in the small town sort of embodied a different
Some of the
aspect
cards
of
and
the
ideas.
cards was the key to, like, unlocking the way I wanted to tell the story. So yeah.
I can't remember where I read this, but I read a couple of days ago that there's going to be specific cards produced with the issues.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Are you designing the cards yourself?
Yeah.
So how is that process in terms of designing them to go with the issues?
It's very fun. I mean, there's so many tarot out there. It's like so many beautiful tarot decks. You know, my favorite is the Vertigo Tarot that Dave McKean did back in the 90s. Which was stunning. But there's so many others. And it's like comics. It's like so open to interpretation visually, you know, with different styles and stuff. So it's really fun to take the iconography and the symbolism and then find the Jeff Lemire version of those things in a small town.
Absolutely.
With these characters. It's a lot of fun.
Because I remember when I was reading the 2 issues, I was like, this feels very Lemire in a nice way. It feels very Vertigo-esque.
Yeah, it really is. I wanted to do a series that evoked, like, the classic Vertigo books from the early 90s.
It's got very, like, 90s Vertigo.
Yeah,
that was
like,
my first
House
thought.
of Secrets and Teddy Christensen and Steve Siegel was a big influence, and you know, Shade the Changing Man. And
Yes.
I wanted something that was sort of a love letter to those kind of series as well. You know, where too often now we write for the trades, but I remember when I was in the 90s reading the Vertigo stuff, I loved the monthly issues, you know, and I wanted something that was somewhat episodic, like they used to be, like Hellblazer used to be.
Yeah.
But you're still telling a big story with those characters.
But a kind of
But
satisfying
the issues
reads.
felt satisfying in a way. Like, they're on the little stories within the story, and I wanted to do that again.
I think that is an approach that is starting to come back in
I
comics.
hope so.
I interviewed Ryan North last month, and he's doing an incredible run on Fantastic Four. And his is very much like that. It's a lot of one and done, the occasional 2-part stories that does have this kind of serialized episodic form.
Yeah, we've
But
lost
isn't-
that, I think.
But isn't written for like an 8-issue trade.
Yeah.
It's a really refreshing read, and it's a really reason why I've gravitated towards that book so much.
Yeah.
And I really hope that is a format that makes a comeback.
I do too. I miss it as a reader, and I think it's something that drives people back to the comic shops every month.
Definitely.
And it's something that's kind of got lost over the last 20 years, you know. Something for the better, some for the worse, but I definitely miss it. I think the importance of monthly issues is something we can't lose sight of, because it's really what supports our comic shops, which supports what we do. So,
Absolutely. So the final question with that then, so obviously tarot is such a big influence on the book. Was that something that you already had a knowledge of going into this series? Which is funny because I think that tarot and comics have this really strange overlap.
Yeah.
I went up to Edinburgh a couple of months ago for a signing with Grant Morrison, and obviously they are like a full-on wizard at this point. And they were talking about tarot when I saw them, and it's like Alan Moore as well. It's like there's quite a storied history of great comic writers. pulling from those kind of iconography and ideas. So what was the research like in learning about these things, and how did you then apply it to the story you wanted to tell?
I think it's the good thing about doing an ongoing series is that I can learn slowly with the character. That's the conceit that I have, is the character Teresa really spent her life ignoring this whole aspect of her mother and not wanting anything to do with it. So she's kind of learning about tarot in real time in the story.
So you can kind of learn with her in a way.
I don't need to be an expert because I'm not an expert, and it's like there are people who exhaustively have studied this, and I'm just beginning. But it's kind of, so I think it's fun to reflect that in the character and kind of give myself a little bit of a, some leeway to like make mistakes with it and misinterpret things. But yeah, it's fascinating. It's incredible.
Oh, absolutely it is. So is Minor Arcana, is that going to be an ongoing series?
It's the plan, yeah.
I read an interview you recently where you said you had pretty much a good chunk of issues already mapped out for it.
I have a 22 issue thing mapped out right now, and then I guess we'll see where the sales are and where I am at creatively.
Well, if there's ever a reason to go and pick up Minor Arcana, please do so.
Yeah, thanks.
Jeff, so the last thing I'll ask you is if there's anything specifically you want to plug and promote. Obviously, we've talked about a couple of ongoing series.
JSA and Flash, I'm super excited to be back at DC with those, and I have a new Black Hammer series with Teddy Christensen, speaking of Vertigo, so that's going to be really fun. And then Minor Arcana.
Yeah. Also, Phantom Road.
Of course.
Which is, I recently picked up the trade, read that. Wonderful series. Fish Flies. A man of a lot of books. It's very impressive. I don't know how you find the time.
I don't know either.
But thank you so much for taking the time.
So.
Let me know your thoughts on everything we've talked about. JSA, Absolute Flash, Minor Arcana, everything in between. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.